Right, greetings, hello. Welcome to the Philosophy Club here in France. It's the 3rd of September today, 2023. So, yes, the world is going through some difficult times, as we all know. Not only do we have the war in Ukraine continuing, in other possible places, outbreaks of civil strife, conflict, different parts of Africa. But we should never forget that there's good news as well. There's thousands of people falling in love, there's thousands of marriages, there's thousands of children being born, thousands of people enjoying their work successfully, creating things, artists making a difference, poets, scientists making new discoveries, so we shouldn't get overwhelmed by the bad news, I think. We should always keep it in balance, the light and the dark. I still think that there's more joy on this planet than there is suffering. That doesn't mean we should minimize the suffering. My heart goes out to the people of Maui who've had terrible fires raging on their island, and in other parts of the world, forest fires are going. I think one of the most tragic things is the pandemic of misinformation, disinformation, and not knowingness. There's a lot of things on the internet about some of these forest fires seem very strange. As chair of the World Peace Gardens Network, I'm very concerned about that. And the trees are our elder brothers and sisters on this planet. We have to protect, preserve, and honour them. And as a Druid, I feel that very strongly. So, let's get to the bottom of how we can safeguard our forest and our tree life. And, only a few years ago, Siberia was going up in flames. Totally unprecedented. So global warming is a fact. And unless you want to sort of go so far down to the conspiracy bubble that you think, no, the forest fires are deliberately engineered to make us think global warming is a fact. Sorry, I don't go there. These things are tragically happening, and so we need to keep our heads straight and our rational faculties focused. We need to do some intellecting, as Abelard called it. So that's what I'm going to be doing today in this philosophy club. I'm going to use the same methodology as I've done for the last couple of weeks. My students aren't here this week for various reasons, but I'm going to select a couple of the tarot cards of the gods of the tarot, and we'll see about their juxtaposition and relationship. I think this is quite an interesting pedagogical process. It's the first time anyone has ever thought of making a tarot pack of all the gods, and it's quite a daring move, because for many religions and followers, even accepting a plurality of gods has been anathema. So in the monotheistic kind of tradition, no, there's only one god and that's our god. Well, as a Druid and as a philosopher and as an Orphic follower of Pythagoras for many centuries, I don't accept that worldview. I think the unity, which definitely does exist, is pluriform, and that's reflected in the colours of the rainbow, the scale, the octave, and the notes of the scale, the chakras, if you want, and the human energy system. So that the unity is pluriform, and so both are important, both the unity and the plurality. As philosophers, we should study them both. You can't do mathematics without the concept of oneness, but you also can't do mathematics without all the other numbers. In my book on the foundations of a religious mathematics, I've gone into this in great detail, and it's available for all students, philosophers, apprentices on the path of learning to research. It took an awful lot of work to do, and I've still got the 4th volume to produce, maybe next year. So look, okay, without further ado, let's see what the gods have in store for us tonight. Well, we have two interesting ones here. We have, firstly, we have again Mananan who we've seen several times, a very important Druid deity, and he was the god of the sea, the Celtic equivalent to Poseidon or Neptune in the Greek and Roman theological systems, and his equivalent exists in all the faiths. The Celts had a close relationship with the sea and with water generally. It was a sacred element to them. All the elements are sacred, but water was as well, if not especially so, and it rains a lot in the Celtic world, thank God, sometimes too much, as I can attest from having lived in a castle in Scotland for 7 years, where it rained, every day apart from 5 days a year, I reckon, were rain-free on average in that particular part of Argyll, at Loch Goil. Some of you may know that place. Beautiful place, but it did rain an awful lot. So Mananan was very present in the castle where I lived at Carrick Castle, Loch Goil. And I got to know him pretty well. It was also the base on which, very close to the base at Faslane, where Britain's nuclear weapons submarines are based. I was friends with one of the people, mariners, that used to go out on these submarines, which are the essence of Britain's nuclear deterrence. Him and I agreed, these should never be used. They're a last resort of defence. And we should work towards a world of no nuclear weapons at all. But for that, everyone has to play ball. We all have to sit round the table. China, Russia, America, Britain, Israel, Pakistan, all the nuclear armed powers, and make a peace treaty and get rid of them. You may have seen the new film Oppenheimer that's just come out. I think he was a bit of a prophet. Oppenheimer wanted the nuclear bomb to be given to an international peace authority, something like the United Nations, which alone would have that supreme overarching power. It shouldn't have gone into the hands, said Oppenheimer, of nation states, who could then use it for their own egotism, be it the USA or Russia or France or Britain or wherever. And I still think he's probably right. His security clearance was denied in the US, but I'm afraid in cosmic terms, in the kingdom of heaven, he, I think, was accurate in his estimation that these weapons are too horrendous to be out there in nation states, causing lots of trouble still to this day, and we're still teetering on the brink of Ukraine, Russia, that threatening to blow up into a nuclear confrontation. It's ironic that Ukraine's one of the few powers that got rid of its nuclear weapons by treaty under the umbrella of guaranteeing powers, one of whom has now broken the treaty and invaded. The lesson is you can't afford to be without nuclear weapons. It's a very, very tragic situation, and anyway, who do you invoke to solve all these problems? Well, Mananan, because he's the god of the sea, and these submarines are roaming around in his element and causing untold suffering. To look at the Fukushima problem we've got in Japan, dumping radioactive water into the Pacific Ocean, causing all kinds of problems. Mananan isn't happy about all this. His home base is the Isle of Man, and that sea is also polluted with radioactivity from British dumping of nuclear waste at sea, as Chris Busby, my friend, has documented in his research as a scientist. How do we get rid of these nuclear weapons? How do we prevent this pollution of the oceans? Well, Mananan tells us through truth. It is his cup that, the king of Tara was invited to come and receive as a gift. And it's the most important tool that Mananan ever gave to a Druid king. Traditionally, Druids always were sworn to the truth, and the truth is very complex, and lies are very complex. It's not just either or sometimes. There's a grey area where, and are white lies ever allowed in a defensive shield kind of situation? Mananan is the master of all that, and the Druids were the experts in that. That's why I've written, as the Peace Druid of Europe, an updated analysis of the nature of the lie. It's an eightfold analysis. I think there are 8 types of lying. If you haven't seen my text on this, just email me or send me a message. And Mananan is against them all. I've been proposing for some years that politicians should swear an oath on taking office not to lie. We have a sort of an oath of integrity in Parliament in the UK, and it just held in the face of Boris Johnson's perpetual and repeated lies. But it only kicked in at the very end, and it was touch and go whether the committee investigating would be able to find him guilty of lying or bringing Parliament into disrepute, or whatever the archaic wording is. I think it should be much more straightforward. I think, the minute a politician lies, there should be an investigation by the ethics committee, and if it's upheld, he immediately, or she immediately, loses office. We cannot afford, in this world of dangers and threats, of conflagrations, of wars and the rumours of wars, to have politicians that cannot tell the truth. It's the absolute basis for any kind of survival that we're going to have as a planet. So that's really it's somber news, folks, for people that haven't got with this message yet. And there are so many things about which we haven't been told the truth. I mean, I'm not going to give a whole list of them, but if you look at my publications, I've written the first historical study of the events of 9/11 with a fine-tooth comb. We've not been told the real truth about all that. And that's why I've set up a historical commission that will be meeting on the 11th of this month to investigate further these complex matters. But that's just one thing. What about all the other things that we're still in the dark about? Now, of course, you see elites think that they can lie and get away with it, and that's fine, and so what? You can't catch me. We have Trump who weaponized dishonesty, still lying, still, threatening the courts, still demonizing people that oppose him, and he's going to go to prison, I think, before long, and he's going to be lying to himself, even in prison. I think the mentality of someone like Trump is, they've got away with it for so long, they succeeded at it, they rose to high office, they had such power, such wealth, such, capacity to indulge their lusts and so on, that why should they start telling the truth now? It's just like, what's the point of that? These people have persuaded themselves that the lie brings success. No, it doesn't. It ultimately brings self-destruction. And not just self-destruction, it can bring destruction to a whole people, a whole nation, a whole community. So that's the warning, really, from Mananan, and all Druids, in a sense, are prophets of Mananan, as well as the other Celtic deities like Lu and so on, who also have their cards. Okay, so that's an important message for our time. Now, and by the way, here's the 9 of water in the tarot cards, which is the 4 elements are earth, air, fire, water, and each has their own deities. So obviously Mananan is a water deity, and the 9 of water. Right, so now who is that juxtaposed against? Well, Ra, the king of fire. Now, the king of fire is another hugely important tarot card. And in the Tarot of the Gods, Ra is, about as important as you can get, really. One of the most important of the deities of ancient Egypt. And the card shows the Great Pyramid and its 3 pyramids surrounding, with the pharaoh arriving at the Nile with a torch and his consorts there, about to walk to the Great Pyramid for a ritual. Fire was very sacred in the Egyptian cosmology. It transforms things, it transmutes them. Plato said fire has a pyramid shape, hence the card, and he himself studied in Egypt. And so, he brought that Ra wisdom, if you want, and put it into Greek cosmological thinking. Fire is the element that purifies and transforms and gives life. Without the sun, there'd be no life on this planet. The sun is at the root of all photosynthesis, which is at the root of all food. Every little atom of energy I'm using to speak, to move my hands, to think, have all originated in the photosynthesis of photons emerging from the sun, taking a few minutes to reach here on Earth, and then being absorbed by plants, which I've eaten in the food chain. The whole thing is an unbelievable miracle. If you don't, know how the sun works, I mean, watch a very good documentary by National Geographic, which explains it takes a photon hundreds of thousands of years from its moment of creation in the heart of the sun through the fusion of two hydrogen atoms, forming one helium atom, then releasing vast amounts of energy in what's called nuclear fusion, which then take hundreds of thousands of years to reach the surface of the sun. It's that big. And these photons swirl around in the state of plasma, which is the fourth state of matter, which is really fire. Fire is a form of plasma. And then, once they escape the sun's surface, they then get to Earth in just a matter of moments. It's interesting that Napoleon, when he was in Egypt, he spent overnight inside the Great Pyramid, and when he came out in the morning, he wouldn't talk about it, but he was white-faced, a bit like Moses going up the mountain and seeing God. God is also, Yahweh, is often identified as a fire, and as you know, I've identified the origin of the Yahweh mysteries, partly in the ancient Egyptian mysteries. I'm not the first to say that. It's a sort of common secret since ancient times. But so this, yes, but too much fire can burn, too much fire can damage, too much fire can burn forests, too much fire can destroy this planet. This Earth will one day become swallowed up by the sun, but it's not estimated to happen for about 1 billion years. During which time we would have countless generations to come and go and enjoy life and learn, advance science, understand the secrets of gravity, understand intergalactic travel, become a civilized and sensible planet of higher sentient beings. At the moment, we're on the cusp of that. And discovering that is very much part of the secrets that Ra offers us, I think. The rediscovery of Egyptian wisdom, Egyptology, the translation of the hieroglyphs by Champollion, who was a great French savant and Freemason and protege of the Napoleonic era, has only just begun. We still haven't really got to the heart of what these Egyptological secrets were, and they were ultimately metaphysical, as the sages who've studied Egyptian religion will attest. There is a transcendental realm, as my friends and colleagues at the Scientific and Medical Network have just had a conference about for the Galileo Commission. The sun isn't just a physical object in the sky, it's a metaphysical process of transcendental beauty, really, as are all suns, but this is our particular sun, so we owe it tremendous gratitude. And Rudolf Steiner and many other sages and savants have spoken about the solar logos. Alice Bailey was another, as it were, the supreme consciousness inside the sun. And that is Ra. That is what this card represents. And the pharaoh was taken as an embodiment of Ra. And that's where true justice comes from. That's where true kingship comes from. We've just had the coronation of, my esteemed colleague and king, Charles III, who I have met and is a very wise king. I hope he long lives and flourishes and can get Britain back on track to being a proper servant nation of the divine will. I know that would be his intention. It's, all the configurations of that coronation ceremony point to that divine mystery of going back to Ra and the pharaonic worship of the solar logos, which manifests in the form of Christ. So the Christian can also embrace and understand this mystery from within, from the metaphysical place of intersubjectivity, if you want. So I don't see, yes, the one is the truth of fire, Ra, Egyptian style, and the other is the truth of water, which is Celtic style. Now these are complementary, they balance each other out. You need both for a healthy environment. We have to get the balance back in nature by doing our own human work as mediators between the metaphysical kingdoms and the physical kingdoms. And this is where truth comes behind, because Ma'at is the Egyptian equivalent to Mananan MacLear's cup of truth. And Ma'at is also part of the tradition that Ra comes from. After death, we're judged how truthful we were, not how much money we had. People like Donald Trump, I don't think they're going to come off very well, I'm afraid. They're going to be caught short, let's say, as will, the Putins and the tyrants of this world, the Boris Johnsons and the people with inflated egos who think that lying, it's justified in a good cause. No, not even in a good cause, unless there's some absolute necessity and it's like life or death for some poor person, then protecting them with, I call that the medical confidentiality. If somebody, if I'm helping someone that's very ill, downtrodden, persecuted, a victim, whatever, and somebody from the officialdom comes and says, are you harbouring such and such? I will invoke medical confidentiality and say no, even if they're hiding in the basement. Because I think as a doctor we have a duty to, our first oath is to preserve life. So anyway, another thing to say about these two cards and the way they're juxtaposed is that there's growing and increasing evidence of the interconnectedness of the ancient Egyptian and the Druid world views and faiths. The ancient Egyptians travelled, they had mastery of the seas, very possible they got to South America, as has been alleged. And it's very possible they even got as far as Britain, because ancient Egyptian boats have been found in the Humber, as documented by, scholarship. And the Egyptian daughter, Scota, Pharaoh's daughter, is said to have been the consort of Gaheel, who was the founder of the Gaelic people, according to the ancient history of Druid Ireland. And they then gave birth to the Gaelic people. And Scota herself is said to have come to ancient Ireland. In fact, you can see her gravesite to this day. Well, even if that's not literally true, and different scholars have different views on this, Lorraine Evans thinks that it's very possible. I would agree with her. But it also points to a mythological truth, as Karl Karenyi would say in his study of Greek mythology and so on. These things are taken as allegories. For as Rabbi Samuel Hirsch said in his study of the Bible, he was a great reforming Jew and a Freemason, we have to read the Bible as an allegorical explanation of the metaphysics of being. And so we should do the same with the ancient Druid legends. The point is that Celtic Druids and ancient Egyptian priesthoods were very close. And no doubt many times Druids will go to Egypt to train. And no doubt sometimes ancient Egyptian priests will come and study and train in the Celtic world, including Gaul, Britain, Ireland, and so on. So I think that's another thing this card points to. And one thing that is immediately apparent is their common love for the bull. Where I live in Limousin, the sacred deity here, Taranis, was symbolised by a white bull. The white bulls of Limousin are still famous to this day. Well, the white bull was famous in Ireland and is at the heart of a lot of the Irish mythology. And a great battle between, the brown bull and the white bull gave birth to some of the ancient Irish epics of the Bronze Age, going right back to times when these cultures were in contact. This is all, a lot of it was never written down, but we can see if we study the comparative mythology that there are traces of each other influencing the other. So I think Ra and Mananan would both want to say to us, if we honour these deities today, we have to be truthful, we have to have integrity. And in our lives, in our politics, in our personal lives, in our spiritual seeking. And if we do that, we will be given the cup of truth, which gives us the ability to discern when people are lying, because it shatters things. If you think about 9/11, the shattering of those two great towers and the third tower, Building 7, that's a literal shattering of the chalice. And it was shattered by lies. We don't know yet the details of who did that. My historical commission is investigating, and if you have some theories or have some evidence, please contact me. But what we do know is it was done by lies. Somebody was cloaking, somebody was faking, somebody was making stuff up, somebody was sneaking around like a dark intelligence agent. And that was, to me, the beginning of the sequence of lies that have led since. It wasn't the absolute beginning, obviously. The Nazi era depended on lies, the fascist era, the communist Bolshevik tyranny of the Holodomor and its suppression of Ukraine right since the 30s, the whole Stalinist regime depended on lies. And right up until in 1990, when it finally collapsed, that was only possible because Gorbachev found the power of truth and invoked it. He was like a sort of, an honourable person of integrity. Putin has gone back to the old lying regime, and we've seen the consequence, utter catastrophe, world hanging on a thread. And it's amplified by social media, which spreads. You see, the trouble with social media is it doesn't have an inbuilt conscience. It's just a robotic world. It doesn't understand the danger of repeating lies. It doesn't have a sort of inbuilt conscience that can distinguish. I've written a novel about the far future in which technology eventually acquires the conscience and can filter out lies. Would that it could happen soon, please. As a philosopher, I think that's one of the most critical challenges for AI. We have to augment AI with HI, human intelligence, transcendental intelligence, moral conscience, and then it'll be a tool worth having. So there are many secrets in these two cards, Mananan, and Ra. I hope I've just shown you a glimpse of them. And of course, if you drew these in the context of reading about your own personal life, one would interpret them accordingly. Okay, I'm going to do just one other pair because time is of the essence. Interesting. Okay, so the first card we have today is Vishnu, which is one of the major arcana, and very important deity. Vishnu is the third of the major arcana, and equates to what in some traditional decks is called the Empress. Vishnu has a soft feminine side to his nature. And of course with his consort, Lakshmi, they make a whole. And therefore equates to the Empress card of traditional packs. But she stands, or he stands, Vishnu stands for abundance, nurturing, fertility, life and fullness. And very much is on the side of life. This is why the Hindus, Buddhists, Jains and others from Indian culture, the Sikhs and so on, believe that Vishnu so loves the world, he's trying to perpetually save it, salvage it, repair it. He's the deity behind what in Judaism we call tikkun in the Kabbalah. It's the repairing of the world, the restoration of things. And he's constantly sending avatars. Now there's 10 who's are in the Super League. In the text I've listed 23, up to and including Kalki, who's the forthcoming avatar, who may or may not be here. All of them have roles to play. It's a beautiful legend, the Avatar myth. And it's true insofar as psychologically, at the time of worst loss of hope, despair, normally something comes just in the nick of time to save us. We all know that, when you're totally broke, can't pay the rent, about to be evicted, a check arrives. When you're just totally feeling depressed and lonely, you meet a new friend. Vishnu is the one that brings that luck to us, that keeps us going. Ernst Bloch, a great philosopher from Ludwigshafen on the Rhine, wrote a very important book on the theology and philosophy of hope. He was a left-wing intellectual of great stature, professor of philosophy in both East and West Germany, actually. And he studied Marxism. He studied that eschatological hope that things are going to get better. I think Marx didn't quite have the key to that, but his heart was in the right place. He was trying to see a way forward out of the chaos and confusion of the downsides of capitalism. He didn't foresee what on earth would happen to the downsides of communism, a la Stalin and Mao. We're still trying to, recreate some hope after all that. But Bloch himself was a master thinker, and, in Vishnu's work, I believe in what I call a meta-Hinduism, that Hinduism is far too important to belong just to the Hindus, just as Christianity is too important to belong just to Christians. I believe in meta-Hinduism, which is this idea of the avatar at work in history is there also in the work of Christ, is there in the work of Muhammad, is there in the work of Guru Nanak, is there in the work of the new religious movements of humanity, is there in great intellectuals like Francis Bacon or Descartes or Plato. They're all, in a sense, avatars trying to enhance and empower humanity to do the right thing. Even Marx in his own way, and Moses Hess and Engels, they're trying to be the avatar of their age, trying to find a way to truth. We can see it in Zoroastrianism and the Mithras tradition, which is like the avatar of Zoroastrianism, and Zoroaster himself, and Buddha, of course. So